for more than 40 years, Lincoln Center Education has been committed to the social impact of the arts, and so I can't think of a better conversation and a better guest speaker to embody the impact of the arts in the world today. Before I introduce our guest, I do want to give a special shout out to Brooke Whitaker-Royster. 2 years ago, Brooke said, please let me curate the speaker series. And for anybody that's ever met Brooke, the answer is always yes. And her husband's in the room, so he understands. And so she has done with this speaker series an incredible amount of work curating conversations that live on the periphery of what we do and that shine a light on what we do in incredible new ways. So Brooke, thank you for everything that you've done. Which leads me to our invited guest tonight, Tarana Burke. You all have her bio in your hands. When I read her bio, what I was amazed was the combination of social justice and the arts. And that is a part that normally isn't surfaced in all the conversations in which she is featured. Her bio says a lot of amazing things, but I wanted to highlight some things that aren't mentioned in it because we are talking about the urgency of the moment. Her bio mentions some media appearances, but it doesn't mention all of them. And as we talk about the importance of why this is relevant now, here are just a couple of appearances she's had in the past, in recent times. She's been featured in Elle Magazine, Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman, The Daily Show with Trevor Noah, MSNBC, MTV News, PBS NewsHour, Time Magazine, Variety Magazine, and I think as of recently, we can now refer to her officially as a cover girl for her appearance in Hannah Magazine to be featured on the cover. So please join me in welcoming Tarana Burke and Brooke Whitaker-Royster.
Thank you. Thank you. Can I do it just one time, Brooke? One time. Brooke! This is an old tradition we have of shouting one another out on the street. We used to do it all the time in Philly. It's my friend. So I hope you don't mind. I've invited some other friends to join us today. I'm glad it's you because people don't think I'm fun, and you know I'm fun. I would see Brooke in the street in Philadelphia, and it was my pleasure to scare the life out of her because she'd be doing regular things, and I'd be like, and really louder than I just did, I'd be like, Brooke! And she'd like, hello, Tarana. I did. And I would answer excitedly. Everybody who's in the audience knows that about me. I'm sorry, go ahead. No problem. So I wanted to start with this. I mean, when I was thinking about how to have this conversation with you, obviously the first thing you do is Google, right? So it occurred to me that when you Google the words Me Too, it's just really clear to see how much this movement has exploded. Yeah. And one of the most interesting things that I saw online was it's a video. It's about 10 minutes long. It's produced by Vice News, and it's entitled Male Construction Workers Discuss How Me Too Has Changed Their Job Sites. That's so interesting. That's really weird. So no spoilers, but suffice it to say, it got me thinking that I don't know if we're discussing this correctly. So we have you here. What is the Me Too movement, and what is the danger of talking about it incorrectly? That's a great first question because that's a question we almost never get to in these conversations. So I think about it in two ways, and both of them are really married to each other, and I think people think they aren't. So there's historically what we did with the Me Too movement. About 12, maybe a little longer than that, 13, 12 years ago, I was working and living in Alabama. I had been doing work with young people for 20-something years, and in 2003, actually, one of my best friends and I decided to start a youth program just for girls, for Black and brown girls who we were working with in Selma. And in the course of doing that work, I had been thinking for many years before that about how to try to find a way to bring sexual violence
to the forefront of the social justice work that I've been doing, right? So I was in this community and this larger national community that organized around police brutality and around various political issues, mostly racial issues, racial and economic issues. But whenever we had the opportunity to have conversations, and I would try to introduce anything around sexual violence, or even gender, for that matter, it was always rebuffed, right? It was always, especially sexual violence, it was always reduced to individual needs, right? Well, we just need to get them counseling, or we need to get this or that. And what happened is that we started this youth program. It was initiated in the school system in Selma. And in a nutshell, I'm trying to tell it a little quickly, but in a nutshell, once we started the program and we started talking about sexual violence, not even talking about it, we started talking to the girls, you know, having these close conversations, they started revealing their experience with sexual violence over and over and over again. And so for me, it was a very clear indication that these people who had raised me, essentially, right? These people in this community who had raised me as an organizer and taught me everything I knew almost about doing this work and being in community, were ignoring this thing that was right in front of us. These children, we were in a middle school, so these children in the middle school all were part of this community. They weren't shipped in from anywhere. They were from right in this area in Selma. And I would venture to say like 75% of the girls we dealt with had some experience in their life around sexual violence, from what we might call the sort of benign to very serious violent experiences. And I'm like, these are our children, right? We come together and we meet all the time. These are our children. And if our children have this kind of problem, then that's our problem. And if these children live in this community, then it's a community problem. And so what we started off by doing is trying to figure out a solution to this community problem. And in threefold, I guess. One was to figure out why, what was happening in this community that was making these children so vulnerable to sexual violence. And then to use our skills as organizers to fight against it. But then there was a third issue that was probably the most, that rose to be the most important, which was supporting these girls, right? This was also during a time of like, I don't know, I don't even know what to call it, but you know when everybody started sort of reading The Secret?
Yeah.
You know, we all kind of got into mindfulness and like, I don't know what Age of Enlightenment, whatever it was, sure. Right? It was like kind of post-Iyanla, but pre-Deepak Chopra, I don't know. So it was, but I knew that I was kind of into that, right? I was like reading all the books and I would go to workshops and webinars or whatever was available. And I was almost always the only person of color, right? And even if I wasn't, the other people of color were privileged in the ways that I was. They were educated, I didn't have no money, but let's just say. I had more money than most of my children in my programs. And nobody was speaking that kind of healing and possibility to our children. Nobody spoke to people in our community as if life was possible. It was always, even us, even as organizers, it was about staving off death as opposed to affirming life. And so our work around Me Too was about centering our stories as a jumping off point for how the trajectory of your life can change. So we did that work for 12 years in various ways, and it grew, and it was, wonderful community work that spread around the country. What happened in October was that Alyssa Milano put this tweet out in light of these allegations and all of this kind of stuff that had been stirring up in Hollywood with Harvey Weinstein to make the point that this is not just in Hollywood, this is happening to everyday women, everyday people across the country. I mean, she started with talking to women, and she made a simple statement that if this has happened to you, essentially raise your hand. Right? But my issue now with how it's being talked about in the media is that those people's hands are still raised, right? We asked people to raise their hand and say Me Too 9 months ago, and then we forgot about them. And we talk all around them. And we talk about the people who did the things to them, right? And we talk about what's happening in their lives. And we talk about the accused and the perpetrators and the false accusations and all of these things. And meanwhile, millions of people still have their hand raised. And that's the danger of talking about this movement differently. This is a movement, it always has been. Whether you think of our work previous to this, or if you think about from October of 2017 to now, it has been about giving voice to, supporting, listening to, investigating thinking about lifting up survivors of sexual violence, period. Anything else other than that destroys, it eats away at the fabric of the opportunity we have. And the opportunity we have is to change that, right? The opportunity, I don't really talk about ending sexual violence. I should. A lot of people, my compadres, folks who do this work,
right,
use that language, and I get it. I think it's not, I talk about interrupting sexual violence because I think that's in our power. And I think ending sexual violence at some point in the future is possible. But today, in a very real way, we have to figure out ways to interrupt sexual violence. And there's that lift, that work alone is huge. Yeah. So if we spend all our time talking about who shot John and what's happening, we can probably poll the audience and they can tell you 5 facts about Harvey Weinstein right now. Most people can give you 5 quick facts about Harvey Weinstein. You can't name, and if you can name 5 of his accusers, it's because they're famous, but you can't tell me anything about what their lives have been like since this has happened, right? What resources have they needed? What kind of mental state are they in, right? Because forget about the fact that they're famous, they're human, and they're survivors of sexual violence who came out publicly and did something that is so difficult, and yet here we are again. Facts about him, no information really about them. And that's a long answer, but
no,
I'm just going
so good. I mean,
I'm let you go and ask
it's
the next
obvious
one.
that we still have so much work to do. I mean, obviously we gained a lot of visibility last year. And I'm curious to know what you think it is about Hollywood that made this movement, why was Hollywood such fertile ground for this movement to take shape?
Oh, because, it's all the reasons that we know, right? First of all, I am not of the opinion, there's a lot of people who are of the opinion that Hollywood stole the movement or ran off with the movement, or they're upset that it only became popular because of Hollywood. I'm not mad at that. I'm not. I think that a couple of things. I think Hollywood is fertile ground, obviously, because you have an industry that has such huge power dynamics involved. You have these people, again, like Harvey Weinstein, who's one of the most powerful men who literally can pick up a phone, as he did, and make or break careers, right? Some of us may have wondered, and I wonder why Mira Sorvino won an Oscar award and we never heard from her again. Because somebody made a phone call, right? So Hollywood is fertile ground for it because of the way that these power dynamics work in places like that. It's like corporate America, right? I really feel like, and don't tell nobody this because I'm thinking about how to do it, but I really feel like we need to have sexual harassment training, but we need to have power training.
Yeah.
We need to have, sexual harassment training in these offices is like check off a box, go through a training, watch this boring ass video that you're gonna forget, right? Like nobody pays attention to that stuff. But if you really start talking about power dynamics and how you break that down, then you start chipping away at the fabric of what causes sexual harassment. The same thing that allows people to sexually harass somebody is the same thing that allows you to discriminate against somebody. Like there are power dynamics in all of those isms. So I think that's more effective, but don't tell nobody that yet.
Right.
We're gonna work that out. Right. Because then there'll be, the headlines will be, Me Too movement founder says, do away with sexual harassment training.
We're gonna edit that part out. So we've talked a little bit about some of the who's identifying some of these folks. And I'm curious to know, recently Terry Crews made his way into the conversation. I know,
so much.
Me too. Made his way into the conversation, appearing before the Senate Judiciary Committee to advocate for Sexual Assault Survivors' Bill of Rights. So I'm curious to know what you think the role of men in this movement is. How important are they?
So I've tried to be really clear, though it's difficult because it's always, look around, it's always a room full of women. Right. This is an issue that's near and dear to us, and women are largely the face of, for lack of a better way to put that, sexual violence. Yeah. But men's role, I think men's first role is to be acknowledged as survivors of sexual violence as well, and sexual harassment. That's something that has to be clear. This is not a women's movement. Right. We really have to, even as women, stand up and say, this is not a women's movement. It's a people's movement. It's a survivors' movement. highlighting women eliminates a whole swath of people: men, transgender folk, binary people. Like it eliminates all of these people and makes them feel isolated. And so I think our role and men's role is to stand up and be identified as survivors, and we need to help make space for that. But the other part is to be allies or accomplices, right? Like they need to be. The really crazy thing in this moment is that, not crazy, I'm sorry, I'm at a loss for better sounding vocabulary at this moment, but for lack of a better way to put it, men's natural response to this is to be defensive, right? I'm not that kind of guy. I would never touch a woman. I've never done this. Okay. Right? It's like, the point is that if you would take a second and hear what women are saying, and just talking about men and women for a second in terms of gender dynamics, if men would take a minute to hear what women are saying, one, they may find themselves in some of those conversations, right? And two, they will see that this is not about just pointing fingers and making accusations. It's about people who are trying to have lived experiences that are whole and full and have autonomy over their body and the right to make decisions. Imagine that we're in a moment right now where we have to fight the government for control of our bodies, and we have to fight our neighbors and our peers and our colleagues for control of our bodies. What that experience is like as a person, if men could hear that, I think, and we have to have the ability to have nuanced conversations. So I think what I would ask of men all the time is to take a step back. The other thing is, we've never had a moment in our country where we could talk about sexual violence openly. This is really the first time, right? Because when Anita Hill happened, there was a huge conversation about sexual harassment, but it was squashed. And it was all women. Oh, women just talk to us, feminists, blah, 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 blah. And then it was squashed, right? The early 90s. Yeah. So we are at a moment now where there's some accountability happening. There's a lot of public dialogue happening. So I also say, give us a minute. Yeah. We just got here. Give us a minute. We got a lot to get out. We got a lot to talk about. So take a step back and don't feel like everything is an attack. Yeah. But I also say to both women and men and people across the gender spectrum that we have to have the ability to have nuanced conversations. Yeah. I'm clear that sexual violence happens on the spectrum and accountability should happen on the spectrum. And so, what's the guy's name? Superman, Henry somebody, Cavill. Y'all know he just came and made those ridiculous remarks about, I'm scared to approach a woman for fear of being called a rapist. That, I know, it's just, y'all take.
It's gone so far.
But that's a part of it. That's a real issue, and it's so dangerous because men have these big generalized statements that they make like that and don't realize that, one, you sound foolish, right? Like, you sound foolish. If you think by approaching a woman and saying whatever you're saying that she's going to accuse you of rape, that's ridiculous hyperbole, and it's not helpful. Yeah. But two, it goes to this thing that's happening where men are shut off. And they're just like, oh, this Me Too thing is just attacking the man. Yeah. That's because of the media. I did a whole Twitter thing the other day. Y'all know I only tweet like once every 6 weeks.
I hadn't noticed.
But it was annoying to me because his comments were bad enough, but the way the media portrays the comments, all of the language, the Me Too movement takes down another one. Who's the Me Too movement going to take down next? The Me Too movement targets so-and-so. So if you're a man, forget about us. Like, we read that and are disgusted and are like, oh, this is frustrating. Yeah. But if you're a man who's kind of like just an average guy and you're reading this, your perception of this thing is that they're after you, that we're trying to get you. Yeah. So that's not helpful either.
Yeah. You know, over the past several years, really, this is not about anything that's happened since September, over the past several years, I've always been just personally proud of, how inspiring you've been with your personal story. And I just wonder if you would talk a little bit about what healing has looked like for you, and if at all the arts have played a role in helping to happen. Yeah.
I mean, it's not sad, but it's so weird to be in this position now. I've been in social justice work my whole life, but I've also been in arts and culture my whole life. And I don't know, is Art Sanctuary mentioned in the bio?
I think
didn't
so.
even read it, but I was
so.
for people that didn't know, I was the managing director of an arts organization for like 5 or 6 years, and then I ran an arts organization. I was executive director of the Black Bear Arts and Cultural Center for 3 or 4 years. So it's a big part of my life personally, and it's a big part of my belief system in terms of healing and the possibilities of healing. And I think more, and I have permission to say this just so you know, but more so than my healing journey being affected by arts, it's my daughter's healing journey has been. My daughter's a survivor. My daughter's 20. And I've watched how she has used it as for so many different reasons, for expression, for refuge, just to pour herself into it, you know, for protection and covering. And I'm so grateful that I was, and it also made it a little easier, but I'm so grateful that I had that to give her.
Yeah.
And only the access, right? I didn't give her the talent, but I gave her the access, and I allowed her the space to figure out what she needed to get from it. And I knew to do that because I've watched it with other young people, and I've watched it with other people. And I've watched, you know, for me, in terms of literature, that's been my healing journey has been very much connected to literature and Black women writers and Black feminist writers. And so if I didn't find myself in The Bluest Eye, if I didn't find myself in I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings, I don't know if I would have gotten to this place, right? I needed somebody to speak to me, to help me find myself in those things. And so that has been the greatest part of my healing, is being able to identify myself in pieces of art, right? I've looked at, you know, artwork and felt I've seen myself in it, and that feels affirming. It feels life affirming. And as a survivor, part of what is tragic almost in it is the feeling of being invisible, of being discounted. And so anything that affirms your life, anything that affirms your visibility, you know, and your right to be here, because I should be here because this thing tells me I should be here, is a part of that journey. And it's been a part of it for me. And so some of the work that I've done is trying to help people make that connection, right? With our young people, we would take trips every year with our girls to New York and take them to museums. And, you know, when Jacob Lawrence had that, they had the Jacob Lawrence exhibit a few years ago. That was a great trip. That was like 2015, I think. That was the last trip I took with girls from Philly, too. And it was so beautiful to watch them find themselves in this artwork in different ways, creative ways that we didn't even think about, right? We can put all our book learning on them, and then they come up with something totally different, and you're like, God, they're so brilliant. So that's been a big part of it. The other big part of my healing journey, and I talk about this a lot, is when I figured out how to curate joy in my life, it changed everything for me. It literally changed everything for me. And so I hate that I don't get to talk about joy as much anymore. I'm trying to keep infusing it in these conversations, because a literal shift happened. Another thing that happens with survivors is that we trick ourselves into believing that our trauma defines us, right? This is who I am. I am these things that happen to me. They happen to me because I'm a certain type of person, right? You carry that trauma, and the trauma becomes an identity. And so I lived with that identity very comfortably. Not uncomfortably, but comfortably, right? You find comfort in the discomfort of it. Like, this is just my reality, and I have to live with that. And it's a long story, I won't tell it, but it was Maya Angelou, essentially, who led me, the curiosity behind how she found joy when I knew she was a survivor, and I knew she had a very similar situation to mine. The curiosity to figure out, was she just an anomaly, or was this joy thing for real? Is this possible? Like, can I feel that on the inside without faking it, right? Because I had perfected what it looked like to project to the world that I was fine and just live with my trauma privately. And then I started, you know, I'm a Virgo, and if that means anything to y'all, you know what I'm talking about. We gotta have answers. We don't let things rest. And so I started I literally tried to do a scientific experiment. Every time I think about this, I just crack my old self up. It's ridiculous. Anyway, I tried to do this experiment where I would document moments of joy or happiness in my life. And I do differentiate joy from happiness, but just trying to document it. So I was like, I'm just gonna write down, I kept this little journal, and I was like, I'm gonna write down every time I feel something, a little bit of something. I was just curious, like, am I just ignoring it, right? Because again, I was reading all these books, and before being Mary Jane, I had sticky notes everywhere in my house. I had all the affirmations. I was doing all of these. They just didn't work for me, right? I would look myself in the mirror and say, you're beautiful and you're worthy, and I'd be like, you're lying. I mean, you know what I mean? It just didn't work. I'm too cynical, and I'm too like, this is bullshit. I don't believe this. And so I needed data. I was like, I'm gonna get some data.
That's right. We're gonna prove this.
Some proof. That's right. That's gonna, you know, if this is true or not, we're gonna do an experiment. And it was, I was pregnant, and then it was when I had Kaya that I started it. My daughter is Kaya. And it would be little things like the baby smiled at me today, you know, or when she was about 2, because I kept it for several years. When she was about 2 or 3, I'd always wear these bracelets, and she could hear my bracelets when I would pick her up from after school, and I could hear her. She would hear my bracelets, and she would go, "Mommy's here!" loud, and then you just hear these feet come running. It was the best part of my day, every day, right? So I wrote that down. It was just, you know, I like when they changed the formula for Trick cereal. In my book.
That's a good one.
I was like, I like this new formula. I don't know why people mad. I read that in the book. I was like, you are a ridiculous human being. But it was just, I just wanted to know. There's also a part about what I was saying about being a survivor. Sometimes you don't feel real, right? People, I see you nod your head. I don't know how to explain it, but there's something about your existence that starts feeling like you're not real. Do I feel things, right? Can I be happy? It just was. But anyway, I started doing that. And when I put the book down, I moved, and I was unpacking and found that book, that journal, and sat amongst my boxes reading it one day and crying and laughing and thought, God, the problem is that all of those self-help books, most of them, I felt like they were trying to direct me to find joy, like, go out in the world and figure out where your joy is. And I'm like, I'm surrounded by it. You just got to look at it differently, right? If I look at my daughter running down the aisle to me and jumping in my arms as a joyful experience that I am able to literally have, that's mine. Nobody can take that from me. It doesn't erase the trauma. I think I had been looking for something that was going to make that poof go away and then fill my life with all of this stuff that was not real. And so my healing journey changed when I discovered that I can live with both trauma and joy, but I can lean into the joy, right? As opposed to the way I had been leaning into this trauma. It changed everything. So then I started telling everybody, listen, y'all, get you a joy journal. I'm telling you, it changes things. It does. Kaya and I keep a joy jar. Well, we do sometimes, but we keep a joy jar. And one New Year's, a couple of years ago, we started going through it like, we are the best people ever.
Look at how much joy we have.
Look at all this joy we have in our lives, right? But you have to remind yourself. And we have to, because self-help, I'm on a soapbox now, but I got to say this. The way we talk about self-help nowadays and self-care, rather is the word I'm thinking of, self-care, is so classist. And it's so elitist. Everything about self-care is like, you know, go do some yoga, go take a girls' trip with your girlfriends, right? It's like relax. And I'm gonna tell you, in organizing, one of the principles in organizing is that you measure success by the person who has the least and what they can do. When the person that has the least is taken care of, then you are successful. I have a girlfriend who has 5 children, aged 6 to 20. Wow. She works a part-time job in Alabama. She is a survivor of multiple things. She lost both her parents within 6 months. Her life is filled with stress. I can't tell her to go on a retreat.
Right.
She's not going to stop and do yoga. So what does self-care look like for her? She has to figure out how to curate joy in her life. She has to figure out how to find things that make her feel whole in her life that don't cost it's not a seminar, it's not a this and that, right? We have to think about self-care in a very different way, because the way we talk about it now leaves out so many people. It makes it unavailable and unattainable to so many people. Let's move on, because that's a soapbox. That's my personal soapbox right now. Yeah. But it's so curating joy in your life helps with that, is my point.
Yeah.
Because that's your personal thing. People get really upset with me when I say it, when sometimes I'll just to be crass, and they're like, oh, what are you doing for self-care? I'm not going to say it out loud. There's teachers in here. But I'm like, if I tell you for real
what I'm doing for self-care,
you going to judge me? I'm like, because I got some E&J in my purse.
And that's how I handle self-care.
Right. Yeah. This is what we're doing right now. I got a Bahama breeze waiting for me. I'm not alcoholic, I promise. But it might be a bunt cake in a Law and Order SVU marathon, right?
It's true. It works too. Both work.
That's real.
Both work.
I feel very good.
Both work.
You know when you click into the channels and you find a marathon, you're like, it's on all day? Girl, I get some grub
Sunday planned. Yes, Sunday planned.
Okay, come on. Let's go.
Thank you. No, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. That's a perfect Sunday. Okay, so, this is an audience full of teachers. Not everybody in here is a teacher, but there's a lot of teachers in here. And teaching artists who, they work every day with students. I think it's fair to say that this is a role where it's possible, in fact, very likely, that you're coming into close contact with people who have experienced trauma of some sort.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious to know, what is your best advice to people who are encountering survivors, sometimes on a daily basis, and can't necessarily relate? They can't necessarily say, me too. I'm curious to know what you would say to those people to kind of help survivors along their journey to healing, help them to curate joy.
This is the thing that I always think is so interesting. Most of us know, most people who work with young people or anything related to that, you kind of know the statistics, the bigger statistics, right? You've heard 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys will encounter sexual violence by the time they're 18 years old. So that means a good amount of kids that you work with have encountered or will encounter sexual violence. And so when I think about educators who work with young people all the time, there's all of this new language around being trauma informed, but we have to operate as if every young person that you're encountering could be or might be a survivor. And I think that helps when it's hard to try to there's lots of trainings and things like this to help identify signs and things like that, and a lot of that stuff is biased. Yeah. A lot of the training that exists that teachers take, and I hope it's changing some, I haven't checked in on this in a minute, so if it is, let me know. But a few years ago, it wasn't that long ago, when I was really looking into how to develop a training for educators, a lot of the training that exists teaches educators, teachers and things to look for signs that are not culturally competent, let's just say. So you look for signs of cutting, or you look for the child that's what do you call it, separating from the group, and all of those kind of things. But when Shay and them come in the room tossing tables over and cursing you out and whatever, a lot of times we look at those children as troubled,
behavioral problems,
as opposed to traumatized. And so we don't inquire about what's happening in their lives. We just say, your kid is broken, something's wrong with this child. We got to get rid of them or fix them or punish them or what have you. So, that training has to change. Those kind of trainings have to become more culturally competent so that it takes into account what happens in Asian families' homes, what happens in Latinx families and Black families and queer families. There's all kinds of different dynamics that need to be layered into that kind of training because we show up differently culturally. But I think in the larger sense, you have to operate as if these young people are coming to you with some kind of trauma. It may not be sexual violence. It could be gun violence, right? It could be any other kind of domestic violence. But they're so, unfortunately, our kids are so, particularly in urban communities, are so exposed to these different types of violence that we need to operate in those ways at all times, which means you have to hear these children, right? You got to read between the lines. You got to look at, no child shows up asking to be bad or wanting to be bad, right? I remember when I moved to Philly, I put my daughter in a local public school. And that's because I had signed her up for a charter school, Russell Byers. And everybody told me, oh, no, put her in Jenks. It's the best school. Now, the area I was in was this, like, what's it called? Chestnut Hill. I'm about to call it Castle Hill.
Yeah.
I'm so back in the Bronx. Chestnut Hill is like an affluent area in Philly. And so all of the little neighbors and stuff, oh, it's a wonderful school. So I said, okay. I put her in 5th grade in this school. And I remember and it was not a great experience. I remember standing outside talking to this black mother one day, and she said, the school was so much better until they started busing those other kids in. They busing kids in from I think, West Philly or something, right? And she really thought we was gonna have a kiki about that and be like, oh my God, those horrible children, right? Like, and I was like, do you think them kids jumped off the bus and was like, we here to ruin this school?
Yeah. Tear this
like,
thing
really?
down. Yeah. You
blaming children for the downfall of this school? So there's that kind of stuff makes me crazy. Sure. So if we treat young people, all young people, and I don't mean to like say everybody's traumatized, so we all got to handle everybody with kid gloves, but from this place that these kids are carrying trauma. Yeah. And so it's about how you listen to them and how you engage with them and how you allow them to express themselves. I didn't have any experience in part of my fear was that I'm not a counselor, I'm not a social worker, but I had a lived experience that I knew very intimately because it was mine, and I put that up against what these young people were dealing with, and I knew what I needed and what would have helped me and would have been different, and that helped guide how we dealt with the young people. And so we gave them a wide berth to express themselves, and we created a level of honesty, with boundaries, of course, but a level of sort of honesty and intimacy, if you will, with them, that they felt comfortable in talking about some of these things. And of course, there's all kind of protocols that are in place, and some of them are questionable. Like some of this mandatory reporting stuff is problematic. I don't know if y'all agree with that, but it's problematic. And y'all know, these are teachers, y'all know it's problem. Okay, good. Because, they get quiet, I'm like, well, it is, I'm sorry. But anyway, that's sort of the advice I would give. Yeah. Like, we have to come into this with an understanding that this trauma is widespread, it's pervasive, and we have to deal with young people from that place.
Yeah, thank you. One of the things I couldn't help but think about when I was planning for this conversation is that, I think we find ourselves in this era of Me Too in large part because we're not really all that good at seeing women as whole people, people as whole people all the time. So I wanted to do a little something special with you today that'll help our audience to see you as Tarana Burke, whole person.
I don't know if y'all want to know all of that.
So, are you game? You ready for this?
All right, here we go.
So we're going to do, I'm going to ask you a few rapid fire questions. They're going to be super short. Be super short questions.
Okay, I'm going to try.
Don't feel obligated to answer in super short answers. You may pass.
Okay.
You may pass. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Tarana Burke, whole person. Ready? Twitter or Instagram?
Oh, Instagram. Twitter is ridiculous to me.
Insta story or Snapchat?
Who or who?
Exactly. Exactly.
No, wait. What did you say, though?
Insta story or Snapchat?
Definitely not Snapchat.
Okay.
I won't do another social media, I promise you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't.
Okay.
So, Insta story.
Okay, Insta story. What would you name your superhero persona?
Ooh. Tarana.
Yeah. Okay. What's the last song you played on repeat?
Oh, gosh. I'm old. I play Mary J. Blige all the time. What song do I play on repeat? My daughter should be here to be like, this drives me crazy. I've been playing Zion for the last 24 hours because Lauren didn't sing it last night. That's a whole nother story. Oh. I went to see Lauryn Hill last night, and she did not sing Zion. I'm so offended.
How could you not? How could you not? Let's call it Zion. What's your favorite genre of music?
R&B.
What era?
90s, early 2000s. All right? Late 80s.
Okay. What's your go-to order at a diner?
I don't go to diners. What would be my go-to order? A hamburger, cheeseburger.
Cheeseburger.
Yeah, you got to say cheeseburger. I don't know. I feel like when you say hamburger, people should know cheeseburger, but they
Like,
don't.
why would I want a cheeseburger without the cheese?
Hamburger. That's so plain.
What's the hardest thing about watching your daughter grow up?
Sex.
Right?
I shouldn't say it because I'm this liberal, cool mother, whatever. But this, I'm like, why did I open this door? I should have been approved. Okay, don't erase that from the tape. It's just, my daughter's so amazing.
Yeah,
that kid
she
is
is. That's
amazing. I don't know, just getting so big.
Yeah.
She's been taller than me since 13, so.
For a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I met you, she was taller. I also know how important your relationship with your mom is. So what's the most important thing you say your mom has given you?
Oh, a yes. I always say, my mother, you know, not to be all stereotypical, whatever. I grew up without a lot of money in the Bronx. But my mother gave me a yes. When I would come to her with the most ridiculous, Mommy, can I go to this trip? How much does it cost? First. But she said yes to so many things that I see so many parents be closed to their kids and like keep them and they're afraid to allow them to go out in the world. And my mother didn't have a lot, but she gave me a yes, and it was the most valuable thing she ever gave me.
Okay. What's your hidden artistic talent?
I'm a fashion plate.
Tis true.
Today is not an indication of that. False. I had to throw this song to come on down here so Brooke wouldn't be mad if I was late.
Name something you've always wanted to do but never learned how.
What haven't I learned how to do? Oh, sew.
Ooh, good one.
Yeah.
What's one thing you tried never to buy?
What try never to buy? What don't I buy? I buy so much. I try never to buy things I'm not gonna wear.
Yeah, good one. What are you reading right now?
Oh, I'm reading Barracoon, Zora Neale Hurston's first book, but I'm also reading Emergent Strategy. Have y'all heard of that book? You should read it. It's so good. Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Marie Brown.
Okay.
Excellent book.
Cool. Netflix series you're most addicted to?
Oh, that's not Netflix. Damn. Can we change it to Hulu?
Yeah.
Handmaid's Tale.
Oh, yeah,
Are y'all
for
right?
sure. For sure.
Goodness, I'm like, it's scary.
Yeah.
Isn't it? It's so
It is,
scary.
and you can't stop watching it.
It feels plausible. Okay. We can't do that because that's a rabbit hole.
Yes, it is.
Whew.
Okay, talking purely ideologically. Ready?
Okay.
T'Challa or Killmonger? It's a hard one.
God,
I know.
it's hard.
You gotta choose.
Do I have to
choose.
Okay. T'Challa. But Killmonger at the end.
But Killmonger, eventually. Last movie that made you cry?
Black Panther.
Black Panther.
Yeah.
What's it like to have people recognize you?
Weird.
So weird.
Weird. It is
Okay.
so. I forget. Yesterday we went to see Lauryn Hill, and I still have these moments of like obviously normalcy because I'm just me. And we walked into it was at Jones Beach, and me and my girlfriend are walking in, and these group of ladies came over, and they scared the hell out of me, and they were like, "Oh!" I was like, "What happened, y'all?"
Who's around?
Right. You know you can't do that to black people. I was like, what? My heart was racing. And they were like, oh my God. And I was like, oh yeah, y'all think I'm somebody. I keep forgetting that. Okay, fine. It's very strange. But I'm completely flattered by it. And you know, and I also get to have the most amazing conversations with people.
Yeah.
And it feels really interesting to represent something that most of us didn't have coming up, right? There wasn't a singular living, not to me at least. I'm sorry, this thing is getting a little difficult. There was not a person that I could point to. Like, I always thought Oprah was a hero, and not just from being Oprah, but for telling her story. And we had, like, individual people. But I can't imagine what it feels like to go and talk to and touch a person who you know represents you as a survivor, who hears you and sees you and wants the best for you. And you know what I mean? So it's a lot. But also, it's amazing. It's flattering, and particularly young people.
Interesting. What's the most poignant piece of advice you've gotten in the last year, and who gave it to you?
In the last year, Brene Brown.
Oh, that's a good one.
I get to say that, Brene Brown. I got her number on my phone now, so we We might as well be BFFs. Brene Brown said, "Don't forget yourself." Yeah, and I love her. I had already loved her, and she's so regular and like.
Yeah.
It's funny I say that about her because I say that about myself. I'm like, I'm just regular, and she's like, yeah, I'm just a regular person who happened to get discovered by Oprah.
Yeah.
But we had dinner a few months ago in Houston, and I was like, it's going on and on about all these different things, and she was just like, you don't have to save the world, right? You're one person. Don't forget yourself.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, so good. Okay, I won't.
Okay, you've done a lot of public speaking. Do you still get nervous?
Every single time.
Okay, what speaking engagement made you the most nervous?
The most nervous. Probably something really early on. Oh my gosh, I did a commencement speech at Penn. Oh God, I was about to throw up. And they kept on saying all of this nice stuff, and they were like, I was like, do you think I have the lives of these children in my hands? Why have you given me this responsibility? But it worked out fine.
Do you have any desire to run for public office?
None at all.
Okay. Do you have
Don't
any
ask
desire
me.
to run for public office?
No.
I'm kidding.
But I
Your
will
chance to rethink it.
run a campaign.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Down the road.
Heard it here first. Okay. Favorite touristy thing to do while in NYC?
Oh, ride the Staten Island ferry. I love riding the ferry.
Best part about being from the Bronx?
Everything.
Yeah. All day.
I'll tell you, you didn't ask this question, but my highest honor over everything was being honored at Bronx Hall of Fame, the Bronx Walk of Fame. Oh my God. Let me tell you something. You could be on TV, you could be on magazines, my entire family, I invited my grandma to stuff. Okay, my grandma lived in South Carolina. My uncle drove to South Carolina, picked up my grandmother.
Yes.
Most of my family has moved to South. They came in a caravan.
Yes.
They were like, we have Bronx 3 generations.
Yeah.
So
That's deep.
it was a big deal.
Yeah.
But I was like, y'all didn't come to the red carpet. Y'all. They're like, I don't want all that foolishness. We from
That's
the
fair.
Bronx.
That's
so,
fair. That's
yeah.
fair.
Yeah.
Of all the places you've been the last year, where would you consider moving to?
I wish I could figure that out. I don't know.
Yeah.
I love New York.
Yeah.
I'm through and through, right? But it's so expensive.
Totally.
So I struggle with that. I don't know. Maybe, I won't say that out loud because it might happen. I was going to say maybe LA, but LA's so weird. Isn't it? It's a strange place. It's like nice when you visit, but if you're there more than 4 days, you're like, why am I here? It's weird. So I don't know.
What's the coolest thing in your house?
The coolest thing in my house, my kid. No. The coolest thing in my house. Oh, I have a miniature, 2 things. A miniature version of one of the what's his name? Jeff Koons? Mm-hmm. One of his balloon animals. I love it so much. It's gold. It's just random and quirky, but I love it. And somebody did a sketch of me and Michelle Williams at the Golden Globes. It's so beautiful. Randomly, I don't even know how to thank the person. Yeah. So maybe it's some artist that you know, but it's so cool and it's
Awesome. Mm-hmm. All right, we're going to go really quickly because I want to get to some audience questions.
Okay.
Here's the next one. What's the item in your closet that you're most obsessed with? You can tell us.
I'm obsessed with these shoes that I can't wear.
Okay.
They so high, and I'm so big. I didn't gain too much weight, but I'm obsessed with them, and they're beautiful. And when I debut them, y'all are going to be like, people are going to see them one day in a picture, and they're going to be like, she got the shoes on. You're just going to know they're so beautiful.
That's fair. What makes you feel beautiful?
Oh, I don't know. You got me there. I don't know. Laughing, when I get to really gut laugh and because it's a freedom in it, and I guess freedom makes me feel beautiful. Feeling free makes me feel beautiful.
What did it feel like when Oprah shouted you out at the Golden Globes?
God, I could cry again right now. You have to understand that I spent in the early years of Me Too. I still have all this stuff. I used to carry it around and show it to people, but it's a little weird to do that now. But in the early days of us starting our first Me Too workshops, it was all black girls, black and brown girls, right? And there were there's so few people of any race, really, to point to who talked about sexual violence and talked about their own experience. And so I had this whole workshop that I would do where we would reveal was Queen Latifah, Mary J. Blige, Gabrielle Union, Fantasia as the sort of they all had stories, various kinds of stories, and we would go through that with the girls, and they'd all be like, "Oh my goodness, oh I didn't know, oh my goodness," and then the last person was Oprah, and we didn't have a lot of money, so they would turn these pictures over instead of having it digital, and every time those girls turned the picture over, it was the same reaction. Oprah, yes. No way! Like they would be so astonished that a person. It makes me emotional even thinking about it. Whew. But they would be so astonished that, like, what happened to Oprah? No, nothing happened to Oprah. And I would tell her story, because, she's told the story a bunch of times. I would tell her story, and that's when we would talk about the trajectory to healing. And it's like, celebrities can be problematic, and elevating celebrities can be problematic, but in these moments, it was the shorthand way of saying that a different life is possible. Yeah. And all of the, like, little singers and actresses were one thing, but Oprah was like, okay. Yeah. Oprah was a 14-year-old girl and that was in Alabama. She was from Mississippi. Like 14-year-olds from Mississippi who this thing happened to and became Oprah. Yeah. So she's been between her and Maya Angelou around this has been my, like, touchstones. Yeah. And so obviously I had no idea that was going to happen. We were in the audience and, I was not prepared to do anything related to emotion but sit there because I was just like, again, why am I here? Right? But that moment was incredible. Yeah. Just the words coming out of her mouth. I used to envision trying to figure out how to run into her on the street with a camera and something, be like, can you just say me too real quick, please? Oprah, can you just say me too? And then, like, put it on. I've sent her T-shirts over the years. Wow. I just wanted to have something where she connected to it so I could take it back to our workshops and stuff and say, this happened to Oprah. So that was, yeah.
Okay. What's next for you?
Oh, gosh. Well, I got a flight at 9 o'clock. So. No, there's so much happening. Yeah. We are building an online and an offline platform. An online platform and offline work. And so this is a great, and I'm sure this is the last question, right?
It is.
Okay. So online, right now, if you go online and you Google anything related to sexual violence, like I was sexually assaulted or help me, I need resources, it takes you to one website. And the website is good, and this is not to disparage that website. I know y'all gonna go home and Google it, so it's not to do that, but it's not enough. Yeah. And no one entity should ever be the catch-all for everything, right? And so we're building what I am calling into existence as the largest resource in the world for sexual violence survivors. And that is what the different ways people engage with the internet who are survivors. There's the engagement to try to find resources. There's engagement to try to find community, and then there's engagement to try to do something. And so we're building a platform that answers all of those needs. And it will be for everything from, we had the reveal of the homepage this morning on a call, and I'm such a sap, I was crying, I'm like, I can't been trying to do this for 10 years. Right. But everything from a quick pop-up, you can do a self-assessment where I based it off of, like, when you go to, like, Guilt Group and these things and you do an assessment of yourself, and it tells you, you're a pop rock or you're glam or whatever it tells you. This is like an assessment that'll tell you you fit into this particular profile, and people with this profile, these resources have been most helpful to them. Okay. And we're also expanding the idea of resources. So again, if you go online and look for resources, as a survivor, you'll largely get a rape crisis center, which is great, or you'll get, some organization that's working around sexual assault, but you won't get, there's a yoga practitioner who does a yoga class for survivors of sexual violence. There's a Reiki person. There's a healing circle. So there's other ways we need to expand what resources look like for survivors. And so we've got a team of researchers who are doing, and y'all are going to see a survey in the next few days. If you follow me on social media, please fill out the survey and pass it on to people you know. because we are trying to comb the country to find in the crevices people who don't have websites or what have you, who are doing work on the ground, both to support survivors and to do the work to end sexual violence. So our website is a big deal. That's what's coming next. And it'll keep growing. We're going to roll out the first phase in October, and we'll keep rolling it out. Because the other side is we'll also have a community mapping tool, which I'm so excited about, because that will allow you to put in your zip code into the website, and it'll give you essentially a report card for your community, and it'll match your community against what we call the ideal community, and it'll show you what your community has and what it doesn't. And so, like, an ideal community has politicians that vote this way. It has these kind of resources in it. It has people who are doing this kind of work. Yours has this, and it doesn't have that. Yeah. Because I tell people all the time who ask me, well, what can I do to get involved, whatever? And I say, look for the gaps. Yeah. What's missing in your community that, you know, and the fair question has been to me, I don't know how to do that, right? Yeah. That's been a response, a fair response. And so this community mapping tool will help people identify gaps, and then identify ways that they can get involved to help fill those gaps, either involved with something that's already happening, tools to start something on your own, or look at the stuff that's happening and see where you can support that kind of stuff. So we are, you know, these kind of things take a long time, but I'm just so hyped about that. That's happening. And then offline, our offline work will start in early 2019. The two things that I did consistently through from the start of Me Too was community healing circles, which is, you know, a training we do to, bless you, to teach people how to hold space for survivors in their community. And sometimes we have like therapists who will volunteer time, or counselors who will volunteer time, and we're restructuring it now because it probably was a little bit. We probably need to have a little more like officialness in it. Okay. but to help people, everybody's not going to go to therapy. Right. Everybody can't afford therapy. Some people need space to be in community with other people. And these are not spaces to come and like just sit and listen to stories of trauma all night, right? These are spaces to come and feel normal. There's a way that we interact with each other as survivors. When I say to a group of survivors that my memory is terrible, they know what I mean by that. Right? And I don't have to feel unnormal by the fact that my memory is messed up because I've spent many years of my life trying not to remember things. And now it's, you know, so those kind of things, when you're in space with other people who get it, it just creates a different kind of community. So we're bringing back our community healing circles and creating a national model so people can replicate it in their communities. And our survivor leadership training, which is, I firmly believe that the reason why, if I had any critique about that first month, really, that Me Too went viral, was that there wasn't enough national response. And I don't mean from the media or like politicians. There wasn't enough national response from organizations who have been charged with doing the work of ending sexual violence or supporting survivors. Even in the first few days, there was no mass push to say, call this 1-800 number, or, you know, I mean, we had mass disclosure across the internet, people who were just spilling out their lives on the internet, and there was no container to process that or to hold it. And that's a problem. Yeah. And so I think part of the reason why that happened is a lot of these large, big box organizations don't really believe that survivors have answers. They believe survivors need services, but it doesn't go beyond that. And so if you believe survivors have answers, with just some leadership training and development and support, they can take over in their communities and start doing the work of ending sexual violence. We should be the ones at the forefront, you know, and every other thing we say to people with the lived experience should be at the head of it, that applies in this case. And so I believe survivors have answers, and they more than have answers, they have will to do this work. And so our survivor leadership training takes groups of survivors in cohorts, gives them the training to go back and do community work around sexual violence.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming. I mean, those are amazing answers. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank y'all. This is great.
I want to take
questions for like 5 minutes.
We're going to take like the best 2 questions in the room. So if you have the best question in the room, raise your hand. Why don't you take that, Rory?
One from this side, one from this side.
Yeah. Stand up and be yourself, loud.
Yeah. Hello.
Hey. So to do what you asked Me Too. And in addition to that, I didn't feel real, like you said, until I confronted my perpetrator. I knew this was going to happen. And I think
Take your time.
as the reason that people don't speak up immediately is because of that loss of realness. So short of taking the survival leadership course, how do I best weaponize my experience when somebody in my community says something like, and I quote, "These women would have been brave had they spoken up when it happened."
Oh, gosh.
Twofold, and how,
This is
how
the
do
best
I-
question.
How do I help them really show up for that conversation and really take it in?
So this is the part that I think, thank you, first of all, for that, all of that question and all of your disclosures. Thank you. So I think that one of the things that people, and if you take something away from here, take these two things away. You don't have to ever dial up www.metoomovement.org, ever, to be able to be active in this work. Everybody literally has a role, and what he's talking about is one of the most important roles. I think the other part that's next for me in this moment, besides that concrete work that I named, is this narrative change work. It is so important that we shift this narrative, and the only way to do that, besides the times when people allow me to get on national television and I can say blah, da, 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 is this. We have to talk to each other. And so what you do, brother, sir, Rory, thank you, it takes a lot of courage to have those conversations, but if you have the courage of your convictions, you can start moving the needle around that. And so I push back against those conversations with facts. People don't really understand what it is to be a survivor of sexual violence, right? And so when you start saying, and more of us start saying that there's a element of shame that happens, right? That is so debilitating that it makes you blame yourself for it, so you don't have the courage to speak up in that moment. When you confront those kind of ideas and thoughts with your real lived experience and facts, it starts chipping away at people's understanding of that experience of persons who are survivors. But that's also the work. Like, if you don't ever do training or do any of those kind of things, if you hear people talk about this movement as a witch hunt, if you hear them saying that this is, oh, that's not for us, sisters in the audience, when you hear people say, that's not for black women, that movement ain't for black women, when you hear these kind of things that are not true, push back against that. That's how we shift this narrative. We have to say this is a movement for everybody. This is not a women's movement, it's a survivors movement. We have to say this is not a witch hunt, this is about supporting survivors of sexual violence and finding ways to interrupt sexual violence. Use language that you use what I said, repeat it, say it, make it your own. Doesn't make a difference. We have to start pushing back against these narratives, because these narratives are dangerous. They really are. We have an opportunity in this moment, right? Remember what I said about those millions of people with their hands up. Everybody doesn't feel this way, but I feel an obligation to those people, right? And so we have an opportunity, and we will waste that opportunity if we don't shift this narrative right now, because this other narrative will take over it, and all of a sudden it's this thing and not the real thing. So thank you for asking that question, and I hope that answers yours, that you push back against those people with facts, and also we all have a little bit of access and power. Where you have access to people, have a little conversation. What would it look like to have a dialogue with the men in your family and the women in your family to come together, or in your job or something, and have and deem it a space that is open, because men are afraid of making mistakes right now, right? They're afraid of saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing, triggering this, whatever. So create a safe space to have some of those conversations, and talk to some of your girlfriends too. It's not just men, right? We always say patriarchy didn't just get one side of it; it got us all by the throat. And so there are a lot of women who have misogynist, patriarchal ideas about life, and who are also spreading this idea. Oh, that Me Too movement stuff is just, these women lie and all the rest of that. So we all have access to people. Use that access to help shift the narrative.
Perfect. One last question. If it's the second best question in the room.
You're right there.
I wanted to ask you if you could talk a little bit about your key collaborators, like who do you collaborate with and what does that mean to you?
Oh yeah, well, this is, and thank you for asking that. People don't ever, there's a way in which the media makes it seem like you're the singular superhero for real.
Correct.
Like I just came out of nowhere and saved the world from sexual violence. It's not true. But Girls for Gender Equity is the organization that I was working for full time before this happened. And so GGE is our like anchor organization. We are housed there. Me Too is housed there. It's our fiscal agent. But also Joanne Smith, who's the executive director, is a thought partner and sister. And so I have other thought. So the women who you saw, some of the women who you saw on the Golden Globe red carpet, that's another long story. But that happened because I asked to not be alone. And I'm like, y'all, one lonely activist on the red carpet is not news. But like, I know about 20 badass women around the country if we can get them involved. So Jen Poole from National Domestic Workers Alliance, Monica Ramirez from the Farm Workers Alliance. We talk regularly, we dream together, and we are building something together and support each other, really closely. Those are, I would say, in this moment, close allies. Besides groups of Demori Soundararajan is one of my dearest friends. She does work around sexual violence in India amongst the Dalit community. Now you got me like I'm gonna name all my people, but there's certainly a little coven of us, and we brew things up together, and it's helpful in this moment to one of the things that I can be, because folks are listening to me right now, and the spotlight is I can be a conduit to bring different ideas, introduce new people, to say, they loved, like I said, they love to elevate one person. So I get to be like, oh, look at this person, So that's been great. And those people are my key collaborators, I would say. Oh, Tony Porter from A Call to Men. We still do some stuff with them, yeah.
Thank you so much for being here. I love what you're doing.
Thank you.
And let's go.
This is great.